unusual and humorous words of Sri Brahmananda Saraswati. Nobody is a fool, and nobody is wise. It is the space within your mind which makes you foolish or wise. If you have space within your mind, then you become wise. But if you have no space in your mind, then you become otherwise. The space that Sri Brahmananda refers to is the space that is within the mind naturally, but it can only be experienced when we drop all memory and drop all worry pertaining to the future. When there is space within our mind, then the enlightened ones tell us the new can enter, a new understanding, a new energy, a new sense of love and compassion that are not really new, but are our birthright, what we are, not what we have, that we are perfect as pure consciousness, pure awareness. To know that we can live a meditative life in the midst of chaos and bedlam in the world. To know that we can be secure and at peace and in a loving, compassionate state through meditation is the greatest gift that we have been given. About an hour ago, some people were telling me about a decision they had to make, something having to do with the world. And one of them said, "You know, I just want to be able to accept whatever comes and let it be. I don't want to have to worry about whether I'm making the right decision or the wrong. I believe," he said, "that what's supposed to happen is going to happen, and what isn't, won't, just as the teachings have been telling us for years." The problem is, even though I understand that, and I believe that, I still need to have that feeling come naturally, so that I don't spend a minute worrying about the future. I'd like that. I want to be, I want to be enlightened so that the world doesn't distress me so much. He didn't say that, but that's what he was trying to say. He wants to move to a higher realm of understanding, so there's no worry after we get up in the morning. Wouldn't that be nice? You all agree. The readings that I will be doing this evening, which are 3 stories and commentary from a book called Vedanta, commentary by Rajneesh, and it's brilliant, as his commentary usually is. But how this fit in with what I'd been hearing from our friends earlier, that they wish they could really be these teachings, not just speak these teachings, but live as sages, live as enlightened, so that we're not only wise when we're sitting here in program, in satsang, but we are, what Gurji said, moving ashrams, that our very presence is soothing for people, is quieting for people. The stories are so profound, although simple, and so clearly give us examples of how much easier it would be for all of us to live in the world and yet not be hurt by the world. What it means when finally the studies, the teachings take, so that we are the teachings. We're not just repeating the teachings to impress our friends, our students, our relatives, but we are those teachings. And as those teachings, we just live as those teachings. We don't have to talk about them. A person is called a sage who has become choiceless. I could say to my friend who said, I wish I didn't have to make decisions or think about it. I said, you don't. Let it happen naturally. Be choiceless. Don't have any expectations or demands that it should be this way or that way. Make a choiceless choice, meaning throw it out there and see if it happens. A person is called a sage who has become choiceless. A sage means one who cannot judge. A sage in India is not the same as it is in the West. This is Rajneesh speaking, commenting. In the West, they've been doing many absurd things. That's us, by the way. One of them, absurd things, the peak of foolishness, has been this, that it is the Pope who gives sainthood to people. Now that's like a certificate or a degree. The Pope has to declare that a certain person has become a sage. The Council of Bishops has to agree, has to confirm it. So it's just like a university giving a doctorate or a master's. Now in the East, this looks like the peak of foolishness, the climax of foolishness. Nobody can make a man or a woman a sage. No judge could do that. This is not something like a degree to be given by somebody else. It is an inner achievement when someone becomes a sage. It is an inner realization. It doesn't depend on anybody. A sage is a person who has become enlightened. Now he has no choices. For him, nothing is bad and nothing is good. He has become natural. He's just like a tree or like a hill, just like a river or like the ocean. He has no mind to say anything, no mind to interpret, and he doesn't divide. What do you think he means he doesn't divide? Doesn't divide between what and what? Doesn't divide between good or bad? What else? Doesn't divide between spiritual and worldly, right? Doesn't divide between pure and impure, evil and good. He just waits to see what the universe will present next. He's just like a tree, or like a hill, like a river, or like the ocean. He has no mind to say anything, to interpret. He does not divide. And if he interpreted, he would know that it was suspect. Because with what instrument do we interpret? Once again, it's the mind that's having doubts to begin with. That's why Krishnamurti was very wise when he said, if there's any hesitation in making a decision, wait till the very last minute before you make it. If there's any hesitation and you have some time, do nothing. Because hesitation means that the ego has joined the group of decision makers. And that hesitation is a clear sign of our unwanted guest. It is said of one Zen master, one Zen sage, he lived in a small hut 3 or 4 miles outside the village. It is told that one night he found that a thief had entered his hut. He was very much disturbed because there was nothing in the house, and this thief, he knew, had traveled for 3 or 4 miles in the night, and he would have to go back empty-handed. So the sage started weeping and crying. The thief also became concerned, and he said, "What's the matter with you? Why are you crying so much? Are you really disturbed that I may take something from your hut? Please don't cry. I don't know why you're crying." And the sage said, No, that's not the thing. I'm disturbed because there's nothing I can give you. And at least you could have been a little more gentlemanly. You could at least have informed me before that you were coming to steal something, because I would have arranged something for you to steal. And there's nothing. And what will you think of me? You see, this is really a great honor that you've traveled 3 or 4 miles in the night, this cold night, to come to my miserable hut. No one has ever given such an honor to me before. I'm just a beggar. And you, by coming here to steal, you've made me a king. Just by the idea that something could be stolen from me. And there's nothing. That's why I'm crying. So you tell me, you're a clever thief. What should I do? I know. Why don't you take my blanket? This sage had only one blanket. Otherwise, he was naked. Just under the blanket, he was stark naked. And that night was very cold. So he said to the thief, "Please, have a little compassion. I'm going to be up all night if you say no. Have some compassion and do not say no, because I really have nothing else to give you. Please, take the blanket. And whenever you again think of visiting, just send me a little word that you're coming, and I'll find something for you to steal. I'm poor, but I could arrange something." The thief could not understand what was going on, but he saw the man crying and weeping. He couldn't say no. He took the blanket and disappeared. And that night, the Zen monk wrote a small haiku in which he said this. He said he was sitting at his window. The night was cool and quite cold, and the full moon was in the sky. And he says in his haiku, this is the sage wrote, "God, if I could give this moon to that thief, ah." This is the mind of a sage, or this is the no mind of a sage. With the same sage, again, a thief happened to come to his hut. This time the sage was writing a letter. So he looked at the thief and said, "Why have you come? What do you want?" And this sage was so innocent that even the thief couldn't say a lie. So he said, "Looking at you, you're so mirror-like. You're so innocent. You're just like a child. I, who tell lies all the time, I simply cannot say a lie to you. Should I tell you the truth?" And the sage was very touched by this. He said, "Yes, of course, tell me the truth." And this one said, I came here to steal something. And the sage said, all right, in that corner now I've got a few rupees. You can take them. And then he started to write his letter again. This time, no need to cry. He was giving the thief, the second thief, some rupees. The thief took the money and was trying to go out, but then the sage looked up and he said, no, stop. When somebody gives you something, you should thank him. The money may not be of much help, but thanking a person will go a long way and will be of help to you. So please, thank me. Now the thief was totally confused. He said, all right, thank you, and then disappeared in the dark. Now later on, the thief was caught, and it was discovered that he had been to this sage's hut also. So the sage was called to the court, and the sage said, oh, this man, yes, I know this man. I know this man very well, but he never stole anything from me. I gave him some rupees, and he thanked me for them. It's finished. There's nothing wrong. The whole thing is finished. The account is closed. I gave him some money, and he thanked me for it. So he's not a thief. When we start acting selflessly, without any ulterior motive, we even seem strange to ourselves. We question, wait a minute, am I really doing this selflessly? I can't believe that I'm not thinking that there's some ego involvement. We distrust, but all we're doing, according to all these enlightened ones, is returning back to our original nature, which is pure, which is naturally compassionate, naturally attentive to the needs of others, that we see and feel others' pains as intensely as we feel our own pain. That's what happens. And so you start to give without any question of having it returned. And people think you're due for the doctor, it's the onset of a very rare disease, or that you should see a psychiatrist. Something should happen because you're not acting normally. And you're not. You're acting like a sage. You're acting like an enlightened one. The difference is that instead of visiting that state, the enlightened live in that state of perfection. Now we occasionally visit and do good work, and then we snap back into the world. But the more we meditate, the more that will be a natural movement for us. And this is a second story. One Zen monk, Bokuju, was passing through a street in a village. Somebody came and struck him with a stick. He fell down, and with him the stick also fell. So he got up, picked up the stick. The man who had hit him was already running away. So Bokuju ran after him, calling, wait, take your stick with you. He followed after him and gave him the stick. By now a crowd had gathered to see what was happening. And somebody asked Bokuju, well, I don't get this. What are you doing? That man struck you hard. You didn't even say anything about the fact that he hit you. Bokuju is reported to have said, a fact is a fact. He has hit me. That's all. It happened that he was the hitter and I was the hit. It's like as if I'm passing under a tree or sitting under a tree and a branch falls down. What will I do? What can I do if a branch of a tree falls down? But they began to shout at him, people in the crowd. A branch is a branch. This is a man. We cannot say anything to the branch. We cannot punish a branch. We cannot say to the tree that it's a bad tree because A tree is a tree. It has no mind. Bokaju said quietly, "You don't understand me. This man, to me, is also just a branch. And if I cannot say anything to the tree, why should I bother to say anything to this man? It happened. It just happened. I'm not going to interpret what has happened. And it is already happened, so why get worried about it? It's finished. It's over." This is the mind of a sage. Not choosing, not asking, not saying this should be and this should not be. Whatsoever happens, he accepts it in its totality. This acceptance gives him the capacity to see. This acceptance gives him freedom. This acceptance gives him or her the capacity to see. The word capacity is more important than the word see. It gives us an opportunity to see with an unbiased, clear mind what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, what is dangerous to the inner, to the outer, just to see more clearly without having been influenced by others, so that what we're seeing is a second-hand opinion. I'd rather that we have the capacity to see intuitively, to know intuitively what is right, what is wrong, to be able to discriminate between what is true and what is false, what is pure and what is impure, having the capacity or the freedom to see clearly. We don't see clearly, especially when our emotions are involved. How many of us have been so clear about a decision, about what we knew about this person or what we understood about that, and the next morning we're seeing completely opposite to what we were so sure about. We have to, one day, be sages, so it doesn't take time to see. It doesn't take time for a clearing to occur. That our clear mind is like a mirror. It can mirror what is true and discard what is not. I have to share something with you that I didn't plan to share. Something in relationship to this example. He said, a fact is a fact, a branch is a branch. It so happened that this time there was a hitter and there was the hit. I happened to be the hit and this man was the hitter, but it just happened. Those words, it just happened, just stirred something in me that happened between Sri Brahmananda and me. I don't remember exactly what it was that troubled me, but something that happened upset me, and it was the first time I had been upset since I came into the teachings and had met Gurji. Gurji had a gift for making everybody happy. Everybody felt wonderful in his presence. And I had been basking in this glow from the Guru along with everybody else, when he said something that troubled me. Later, I realized I hadn't understood what he meant, but he said something that troubled me. And since I was the one who was driving him back to his apartment, that the programs were going on 72nd Street and Columbus, I think, in those days, I must have exuded some negativity, because I usually didn't talk to him, I just dropped him off. It was very clear that something was wrong with me. So we rode a little bit. It was about a 5-10 minute ride. And he said, "Something bothering you?" So I said something, and it must have triggered something in him, because he raised his voice and he said, well, it's up to you. Either you stay or you go. Like that. And he had never spoken that way to me. I was a baby. I was a newcomer. This is my first initiation into what it's really like to be trained by a guru. I said, well, I can't go home this way. I said, I'll drop you off, and I'm going to park the car, and I'm going to take a walk. And he kind of went like this, do what you want. And he left. And I circled the block several times, and very windy. It was a cold, windy night. And then I said to myself, either he is your guru or he's not your guru. If he is your guru, you will stop questioning him. That's not your role. You just listen quietly, watch him, learn from him. And I said, I'm going to tell him that. And I went upstairs. I don't remember what apartment he had. I got off the elevator, I turned right, and there was his door, and it was slightly open, and I heard him crying. So I didn't know whether to go in. I didn't know what that was about. I opened the door, and he just looked at me, and he said, thank you for coming back. I said, no, thank you. I'm so sorry. And I started to cry, and I backed away from him because I was so ashamed to have behaved that way. But he said, it happened, that's all. Can you imagine for yourself that you did something to someone you loved that was disrespectful, dishonored the person you loved? You knew you were in a state of ego when it happened, and you're feeling that really you don't deserve to have a guru like that, and he'd be better off without you. And the guru turns and just says to you, it happened. It happened. How sweet is that? That means it had nothing to do with us. We were the occasion for that happening to happen. And that's what Bokuju was saying. It happened that a tree dropped a branch on my head, or a man hit me on the head. What's the difference? I was hit on the head. By a tree, by a man. To me, it was just a happening. Now that's what I'd like for us to get to. To that point where someone can really do something that's hurtful and hateful and totally disrespectful of our feelings. And if we see that the person really feels bad about it, no matter who that person is, if we can say, don't worry, it happens. It happens. Buddha came to a village one evening. The whole village gathered around him, but he was waiting as if for someone. And then somebody asked, Lord Buddha, why are you waiting? Everybody has come. Please, start your sermon. But Buddha said, no, the one for whom I have come is still absent. I will have to wait. You can hear me, but you cannot listen. The person for whom I have come has not come. Now they were very much disturbed because all the respectable people were present. The rich were present, all the good, the saintly, religious, they were present. So for whom is Buddha waiting? And then a girl came, a very ordinary, poor girl. She was coming back from her field where she had been working. And the moment she came, Buddha started his sermon. So they asked, "You were waiting for this girl? We're not even aware that she lives here in this village." And Buddha is reported to have said, "It is only she who is receptive in this village. It is for her that I have traveled. She doesn't know much. She's not a scholar. She's not rich in any way. She's not respectable. She belongs to the untouchables. She's poor, unknown, but she is receptive. And she has called me. Her receptivity is such that I became aware in the neighboring village that someone was calling me to flow. So I have come to this village because of her." Those words are so beautiful, I feel I have to say them again. She's not rich in any way. She's not respectable. She belongs to the untouchables, is very poor, unknown. But she is receptive. And it is she who has called me. Her receptivity is such that I became aware in the neighboring village that someone was calling me to flow. Not to speak, to flow. I have come to this village because of her. A disciple is one who is ready to receive, who can become like a womb, who is passive, open, vulnerable. I have a story about this too. Just came. Someone who is ready to receive is like a womb, is passive, open, vulnerable. And a master is one who is flowing, overflowing, dispersing his last body into the existence. Flowing, overflowing, dispersing his last body into the existence. And the best way is to become food for these masters who are seekers. This is Jesus' sacrament. The best way is to become food for those who are seekers. Best way for a master is to become food. This is the sacrament of Jesus. This is why the last thing he did on this earth, Jesus, was to call his disciples for the Last Supper. That is a symbol. Before he leaves, they should eat him totally. That means he's ready to give everything, all of his being, to the disciple who is open and ready to receive. I'm beginning to recognize as I get older and older that our Guru brought life to these stories by his actions, by his behavior. What came instantly to my mind when I didn't before, didn't this morning or last night when I was reading these over and over. But just now, a real life incident happened just like this with Buddha and that girl. After Gurji's stroke, people in Hawaii asked him when he'd come back to Hawaii. He had been going there for years to give program, and he had a group of people there who were very dedicated, very loyal to him. And even though he'd had a debilitating stroke, they knew he was still talking with difficulty, but had the same energy and wisdom and beauty and knowledge and joy. So they missed him and they wanted to see him again. he took a few people to go with him. I was there to translate because it was difficult for people to understand him. There was that loyal group of about a dozen people. And I said, isn't it touching that these people love you so much that they cancel so many appointments to be at your first program? And he said, yes, I won't give the name. He said, but where was so-and-so? I said, oh, I don't know. I sent her notice you were coming. And he said, but she is the reason I came. This woman was not very popular in Hawaii, in California, at the ashram. We've had so many people in the last 50 years, I know you won't know who this is. So I'm not worried about that. But the reason she wasn't liked is because she didn't care about anything but Gurji. She didn't care if she took our food away from us as long as he had something to eat that was nourishing. And she would do that. You don't need that bread, do you? And she'd take that. And then she said, I don't want you calling because he looks tired to me. And we were very resentful, very bossy. And that's all we saw. She was bossy and overbearing, and nobody liked it. And to hear that he had traveled all the way to Hawaii with his body in pain and difficult for him to speak, he traveled there for her? I was speechless. I said, do you want me to call her? He said, yes, call her. I said, all right. So I called her, and she said something to the effect that she couldn't make the first program, but she was coming to the other one. And she said, did he ask you to call me? I said, yes, he did. Wasn't that sweet, Joan? I said, yes, it was. Well, she came, and while everybody was listening, transfixed to his commentary, to my reading, I was doing the reading, everybody but this woman, she just sat there and cried. She was overcome because she was in the presence of her guru. The rest of us wasn't feeling what she was feeling. So around the middle of the trip, we stayed about a month or 2 months, I don't remember, I brought it up to him. And I said, what is it about her that made it so important? He said, you couldn't see? You couldn't see? I said, well, I know she loves you. I said, but a lot of people love you. He said, not like that. And I don't remember how I put it to him, but I wanted to know what he meant by that. And he said something similar. He said, I reach her on the heart level, not on the mind level. When she's with me, she's receiving on the heart level. And that's what I need from a disciple. I need total trust. I was very moved by that. I began to look at her in a different way. And he said, this is not the only lifetime she's been this way. She has been suffering because her heart has been open, but she hasn't been able to receive what's being given to her. He let me know she had unfortunate lifetimes and had gone through much suffering. He said, that's why she is the way she is. She only can focus on this love she has for the Guru. He taught by example. He taught by incidents, by scoldings. He taught by praising. He taught by disappearing. He taught by performing miracles when they were needed. He taught by never hiding the fact that he wasn't totally enlightened until the very end of this incarnation.